Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay and the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
Welcome to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez, Brian Murphy with you here as spring and April just kind of rolls on, and we're now getting to the end of the spring sports, and of course the most important spring sport of all, spring football, right? Anybody? I know how Brian feels about it, but and I really know how Eric feels about it. But you know who we will have as our guest today, talking about that, Jeremy Brener. Hi, Jeremy.
Hi, Jeff.
I know you're more excited about the Rockets, but
I mean, Jeremy was the one guy that was there, right? You were there. Somebody was there.
Well, Derek was there too.
Spring football. I think the lack of appeal about spring football is that it's not fall football.
It's not.
That is ironclad. So we are Black and Gold.
Yeah, but there are some nice pieces about it. There are some nice parts about it.
We'll talk about that, the little festival that happens and all that, the music, food trucks and all that. We'll talk about that and plenty more. We'll catch up with baseball and softball insofar as Brian Murphy and Eric Lopez are willing to tolerate it at this point. And we will talk about the UCF Hall of Fame inductions as well. We are Black and Gold Banneret, SB Nation's home for your UCF Knights. You can follow us at blackandgoldbanneret.com, facebook.com/Black and Gold Banneret, and UCF_Banneret on Twitter. Follow us each at Jeff_Sharon, Eric Lopez Elo, Spokes_Murphy, and Jeremy Brener, Brener on Twitter. Is that right, Jeremy? I got that right?
Couldn't have said it any better, Jeff.
That's what I thought. All right, let's dive in. So the big, I guess we can call it the big event from this past weekend, spring football, as the spring practice comes to a conclusion. Jeremy, you were there, and laugh all you want about how much or how little of a deal we make about a spring football game, but there were some questions I think that some fans wanted some answers to, particularly with the quarterback situation. So you were at the game, you talked to everybody afterwards. You wrote up a couple things on Black and Gold Banneret for us, in particular the three biggest takeaways, and one of them was your evaluation of the quarterback situation. And let me be Mr. Sports Cliche Guy and ask you, did we get an answer? Do we know who the quarterback is right now?
Yes, the quarterback is Dante Culver.
Yeah.
That's done.
All right, moving on.
No, is he in the Hall of Fame? Is he in the Hall of Fame?
Yes,
he's in the Hall of Fame.
Okay. Yeah, well, he wasn't there, but there were a lot of other, newly enshrined Hall of Famers there, with Marshall and Kevin Smith and George O'Leary. So that was.
Hold on now. I was told they weren't there in the stadium.
Hall of Fame.
Brandon was there. I know that.
Brandon Marshall was definitely there.
Okay.
I definitely saw him in person, and if that's not Brandon Marshall, that is a really, really tall man who should be.
Brandon was there. Brandon was there. George had to go back because he had to host the UCF women's golf team for the American.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
that's right.
Priorities. George O'Leary eschewing the UCF spring game to host the UCF women's golf team.
Well, they were.
I think if Kevin Smith was there, he would have been fired.
Considering he's the running back coach at FAU and they had a spring game over there, and he's probably not allowed to watch UCF play in the spring game considering they're in the schedule. Yeah, I talked to Kevin. Yes. He was driving back for the FAU spring game. So you were left with Brandon Marshall, Allison Kime, and Alini Reyes were the ones that I believe were in the stadium, actually.
Yes, they were honored. That's a better word. They were honored at the beginning of the game, which I think was very cool because it kind of, connects the UCF from the past to the UCF present, and a lot of recruits were there. A lot of future recruits were there. I stood down on the sideline before kickoff, and there were recruits there, and so it was like kind of linking, past, present, and future, which I thought was a really cool thing that happened.
So what did you see? I want to go back to the quarterbacks for a second. So we saw a little bit of DJ Mack. We saw a little bit of Quadri Jones, who actually looked pretty good. We saw a little bit of Brandon Wimbush in a UCF uniform for the first time. And we saw a little bit of Dillon Gabriel. So what were your impressions of the guys who took the snaps? I don't know. Tell us something that maybe we weren't quite expecting about how they performed and what you saw. What was your evaluation of the quarterback?
Yeah, so, well, it was very interesting because they kind of they put all four quarterbacks out there in consecutive drives. So DJ Mack got his turn, then Brandon got his turn, then Dillon got his turn, and then Quadri. And it happened in a span of 5 game minutes, which was also like maybe 7 or 8 real minutes in time. It went by really quickly. And I think that was something that the team really wanted to pride on, and especially like get it started. And then after that, it was a rolling clock. And it seemed like the first 5 minutes of the game took the exact same amount of time as the last, however long was left, which is kind of ironic and kind of funny. But something that they're preaching this year is that they want to be faster than they were last year, which is kind of a lofty goal considering they were one of the fastest teams in college football last year. But there's a good chance that they want to go faster this year, and there's a good chance they might actually be able to achieve that. Largely in part to the fact that it's year 2 in the system, and a lot of the skill players are very comfortable in the system. A lot of the offensive line very comfortable in the system. But the one thing that's different about this team this year that will be the biggest difference between the 2018 Knights and the 2019 Knights is the quarterback. And I can tell you that the spring game was not a very good indication as to who has an edge over one or the other. But I will say this, and it's kind of funny that I remember the last time I was on the podcast, we were talking about, who the quarterback was going to be next year. And I did say Dillon Gabriel. And I'm going to be honest right now. I'm going to stick with that prediction. I think Dillon Gabriel is going to start for this team. Maybe not week 1, but I think that Dillon Gabriel will be the starter at the end of the day. Bentavious Thompson talked about it in the press conference. They were like they wanted to keep it hush hush about any quarterback. And to be honest, no quarterback really has like an edge or anybody. I wouldn't like, and we still don't know if Dillon's going to get redshirted or not. We don't know if it's going to be Wimbush or Mack or even Quadri, but specifically, Bentavious called out Dillon Gabriel and commended him in front of media members. So that to me stood out in that he's just a really sharp quarterback. I do think that Dillon Gabriel is the most gifted quarterback on the roster, which is why I feel like he should start. But as to who performed the best in the spring game, I'd probably say the most impressive in the spring game was probably Darryl Mack, only because he had a drive at the very beginning of the game. He had like 2 straight 30-plus yard completions to start the spring game, and the second one led to a touchdown. That was probably the most impressive thing that I saw throughout the day. Brandon Wimbush, a little bit shaky here and there, but he probably had some of the best textbook throws. Dillon Gabriel probably had the most sheer talent, and Quadri Jones had the longest play of the day, a 75-yarder to Rashawn Lewis, son of Ray Lewis. So they all flashed a little bit of good, a little bit of bad as well. So they really, if they wanted to continue to put a lot of doubt on the quarterback situation, then UCF definitely did their job.
What I think is, it feels like you could. I mean, everyone was talking about Dillon Gabriel and how good he is. It feels like if you somehow put Darryl Mack and Brandon Wimbush into a machine that somehow combined the two of them, that would be a really interesting situation too. But you mentioned Beno Thompson, who had 100+ yards in the game. I think that he might be a key to replacing Taj McGowan next year. But aside from the quarterbacks and aside from Beno, who else kind of stood out amongst the crowd in this glorified practice.
Yeah, the player that stood out the most was, without a doubt, Jacob Harris, tight end / receiver. He's a guy that can probably fill in the role Jordan Akins and Michael Kulubiali had in the last 2 years, where he's that big, featured a lot on special teams last season, and he was seen as like this guy that could really make a difference, and he was seen as like this spark plug on special teams. He was oftentimes the first man down the field when a punt was taking place or a kickoff return. Jacob Harris is one of those main guys, and he's a big dude. He's maybe 6'5", probably like 250. I don't know, but he's definitely like a big dude. He's like a guy you don't want to really mess with him. And I wouldn't mess with him. But he's very interesting. If you like, and I'm gonna write about this in hopefully the next week or so on the Banneret. So he was brought on by Scott Frost as a walk-on, but he originally was a soccer player, and that was something that he played soccer. And he didn't start playing football until his senior year, where he was a free safety. It's a very unique skill set, and that's what Heupel talked about. It's what Harris talked about, and it can create to a very interesting, guy. He had probably a chance at about 4 touchdowns. He ultimately had 2, so he's got a little bit of stuff to work on in terms of his hands. But overall, he's a huge athlete. And that's honestly what UCF looks for in their skill players, is just pure athleticism, and that's what Jacob Harris is.
Yeah. Now let me ask you real quick. I know you got to go because the Rockets are getting ready to play their playoff game, and I know you're covering that for Dream Shake. But defense, anybody who stood out on your end there, because there's a lot of losses from last year.
The person that stands out to me is probably Nate Evans. He's kind of stepping up as a vocal leader in the defensive room, the linebacker room, and he had probably the most physical play of the game on Otis Anderson during probably the second quarter, third quarter. But he's shown that he's becoming a mentor to the young guys, and there's still a lot of guys that are going to come in May for the summer. A lot of underclassmen, a lot of freshmen, and it seems like Nate Evans is someone that is willing to take that vocal role that Pat Jasinski filled last year. And then but there's a lot of guys that are going to step up. You have Neville Clark and Richie Grant stepping up. But if I had to look at one person in particular, it's probably Nate Evans, because I feel like he is feeling like it's his responsibility to be a bigger voice on the team. And he's going to show that not just vocally, but on the field.
All right. Sounds good. Jeremy Brener, thanks for the breakdown of the spring game. I know you got to get going, but we appreciate your time. We'll talk to you soon, man. All right?
Of course, guys. Always my pleasure.
All right. Stick around. What we're going to do is we're going to come back, and we're going to talk a little bit more. We got baseball and softball coming up here on the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Stick around. We're back after this.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.
All right, welcome to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez, and Brian Murphy back with you. Thanks again to Jeremy for joining us on the breakdown of the spring football game. Make sure you follow him at Jeremy Brener on Twitter. He's got a couple pieces up on Black and Gold Banneret for more on that. So, all right, so let's make the transition now. We're full in on baseball and softball right now, and of course, just in time for them to have a really tough weekend. So Murph and Eric, we're going to start by talking a little baseball. They went up to Cincinnati.
Yep.
And this kind of felt, I don't know. I was following you all weekend, Murph, And that 7-6 loss on Sunday, first UCF won 15-0. They run ruled Cincinnati on Friday.
You do not see often the Friday run rule. That is hard to do. Yes.
Yeah. Because no one's mailed it in at that point, but they come back, they lose 8-3 on Saturday, and then they lose on a 2-run homer in the second game of the doubleheader on Saturday. There was weather that was supposed to come, right? So they flipped it to a doubleheader, and the Knights get swept in the doubleheader. Right. Off a walk-off homer on the Saturday. So
a walk-off homer with a 1-run lead, a 2-run, 2-out, 2-strike walk-off homer in the bottom of the ninth is how UCF loses yet another series.
Ew, just that. I mean, this one. I'll let you take the baton on this one, but this one felt like it really hurt.
Yeah, and you don't want to say it. You don't want to say it carried over into what was a game on Tuesday against FAU, who was a good team. FAU's is in the top 60 in RPI. I mean, it's a decent team, and UCF loses again on Tuesday, so now they've lost 4 or 5. And after the game, speaking to Coach Lovelady, it just seemed like there was. I've never seen him more quiet, more quick with his answers. If you've been around Coach Greg Lovelady, he's pretty talkative, and even when things are going wrong, he's pretty lively. It just seemed like there was really no life there, and I think the last 2 games have just stunned this team. I will just say that. And to make matters worse, Lovelady said after the Tuesday game that starter Trevor Holloway is probably out for the season. He had missed the last 3 weeks. He had missed the last 3 weeks with bicep tendonitis. But now, with him being out, he joins Ryan Saltstall. He joins Joe Sheridan, David Litchfield, Zach Helsel, who are all out for the year on the pitching side. Kyle Kemp, who is their closer and would have been on the mound for that Cincinnati 9th inning if he hadn't been hurt with a hamstring injury. At least he's expected back this weekend when they play Wichita State. But there's so many injuries right now. The offense isn't really clicking much. They have, 4 guys in the offense that are pretty dependable with Ray Alejo, Tyler Osick, Dallas Beaver, Matthew Micah, and really none of those guys are really lighting the world on fire right now. The bottom of the order is always a grab bag if you don't know what you're going to get. And Sunday is just, really every series finale has just been a complete roller coaster for them. The 2 things they can hang their hat on are Sherman, Grant Sherman and Chris Williams, their front 2 starters. Otherwise, this team is a mess. It's now 4-8 in conference. They're halfway through conference play. They're coming off probably their worst conference loss that I've seen them experience since I've been covering them in the last couple of years. So now they go back on the road against a not very good Wichita State team, but you just don't know what you're going to get with this UCF team.
What has happened other than the injuries? I mean, obviously that's it, but is that the only thing?
It hurts. Coach Lovelady wants to build his team around the bullpen. I mean, he wants to shorten games, and right now they don't really have the weapons to do that. Kemp being out, obviously, probably cost them at least 1 game. Certainly, that Cincinnati game probably cost them. Zach Helsel, who had Tommy John surgery back last month, he was going to be a pretty big part of their 7th inning, 8th inning bridge. And then you've got guys who just have been inconsistent. Garrett Westbrook hasn't pitched very well. Jackson Clare hasn't pitched very well. Jalen Whitehead has been up and down. That bullpen's just not been very good. And so they're forcing younger guys like Zach Hunsaker. Zach Hunsaker is a freshman whom they probably wanted to redshirt this year, but with all the injuries and all the inconsistent play from other guys, he's been forced into action, and he's actually been pretty decent. But he now was on the mound for that Cincinnati game with Kemp out and all the other injuries and kind of the other lesser dependable options. He was the guy they turned to finish that game out on Saturday against Cincinnati, and he gave up the home run. And this is a guy, again, who probably at the start of the year wasn't going to pitch this season. Offensively, it is basically a lineup that's cut into 2, which is the top 4 are pretty solid with Alejo, Osick, Beaver, and Micah. And then the bottom 5 through 9, or maybe you can throw Dalton Wingo in there sometimes, but 6 or 9 especially, you just don't know what you're going to get, and mostly it's not much. And then they can't find a way to finish out a series. They're always good at winning on Friday or Saturday because their starting pitching is pretty solid with Sherman and Williams. but they have no way to wrap it up because they really don't have a Sunday starter. And when they go bullpen by committee, that bullpen's just not good enough to give them, 6-7 innings of decent baseball. So it's a mess. And they say they got a lot of games left, but again, we're already halfway through conference play. Time is of the essence. They need to win a series that is so basic level analysis, but this team has to show they can really win a series. The one series they won, which is against USF, they came out of that feeling awful about themselves because they clinched the series on Sunday to finish up a suspended game the night before. But then they lose the Sunday game, the regularly scheduled Sunday game. They lose that game. So yeah, they win the series, but they leave it on a loss that was really mistake filled with a lot of errors and bad pitching. And it was just even the wins they get, even the series wins they get, what they have won, it feels like a loss. And so the attitude around this team isn't great, and they want to keep preaching about staying positive and keep going forward. But this team has just run into a bunch of roadblocks and just things that are out of their control.
Wow. All right. So that's the good news. But is there, I'm looking at the RPI. They dropped, I think, was it 12 spots in the RPI? They went from 58th to 70. Over the weekend. They're 22.
What's a miracle is that Baseball America still has them as one of the next 4 out. Now, they're not the first 4 out. In fact, according to Baseball America and their Wednesday latest projections, they have Florida Atlantic moving up to the first team out as a result of the win against UCF, which Murph saw. UCF is still one of the next 4 out. So what that tells you is this is a weak year in the bubble. There's not a lot of good stuff in that bubble. So if somehow this team were able to get on a roll, they could sneak into the tournament. But I got to be honest. Every word that Brian Murphy has said about this baseball team since February has kind of been true. And this team, I don't see this turning around. They don't have the bodies to turn it around, right, Murph? And at the end of the day, that's the problem. You just don't have what it takes to turn this around. I don't think there hasn't been any proof of that, right?
They don't. If they get Kemp back, that'll stabilize the back end of the bullpen a little bit. But they're short on starters. They're short on bridge relievers. They're really short on offense. It's really half of an offense at this point. They just don't have the production 1 through 9 and in their pitching staff to really mount any serious run. They can win a series here or there, but this is a pretty mediocre team. This is a very mediocre team because of everything they've got. And I will say, Jeffrey, that RPI drop happened Tuesday night. That was only their drop from Tuesday. They were 58 going into that game against FAU. They dropped from 58 to 70 after losing to FAU.
Ooh.
They dropped from 33 to 58 after Cincinnati's series loss.
So you're saying that in the span of 2 nights, they dropped from 33rd. In the span of 4 games, they dropped 37 points in the RPI. Whew. Man, that's I guess. Well, no wonder Coach Lovelady was so, I guess, for him despondent after that. Is there? I don't want to end this on such a sour note. From my buddy Sam, but geez.
Yeah.
Is there any light at the end of the tunnel here?
Wichita State's not very good. So the Shockers are coming in on a 6-game losing streak. Although that losing streak was preceded by a winning streak in which they won 11 of 12. So try to figure them out if you can. Wichita State's pretty good offensively. They have a couple guys with an OPS over 1,000. There's no one on UCF that has an OPS over 1,000, and Wichita State has 2. However, Wichita State's pitching staff is probably one of the worst, if not the worst, in the American. They have one starter with more than one start this year. If any starter with more than one start this year, they have one guy with an ERA that's less than 5. So the pitching's pretty bad. It could be a slugfest if guys like Alejo and Osick and Beaver get going, and if UCF can get some production from the bottom of the order. What's really important for this team right now is that they can't afford to lose any games that Grant Sherman and Chris Williams start, especially Sherman, because he's been absolutely lights out. That is the one really bright spot about this team right now. Grant Sherman, they're for this week, been Thursday night starter, but really he's their ace. He has been fantastic for the past month. And Chris Williams has been pretty good up and down, but decent enough. They can't afford to lose the games they start because they're going to probably lose most of the series finale games because they just have no answers for those series finale games.
Well, hey, 22-15, it's going to be a grind. It's going to be a grind, but I mean, the good news is, I hate putting it this way, but it's true. They're not in last in the conference, and
right.
That means that they, if you're in last place in the league, you don't get an invite to the conference tournament. Only the top 8 out of 9 go. Right now, that's South Florida. They're 2-10, and at least the Knights are 2 games ahead of that at 4-8 in the conference. And there's still room to sort of build that, put a little breathing room between you and them. But and it is going to be a grind.
The series this weekend is against the teams that are in the 7th and 8th place positions. So
that's true.
If you're looking at that, at least you need to win this series so that you further distance yourself from the stellar, and you're actually able to at least get a spot in the conference tournament in May. That is like something that you can really pull out of a series win.
Now, I'm not familiar with Tulane's non-conference schedule, but if the conference tournament started now, UCF would be in a group with Tulane, who's 25-12. UCF's 22-15. UConn, who's 24-13. We already know how that went. And Memphis, who's 17-17 and 4-5 in the league. So at the very least, it feels like they could, if the conference tournament started today, we still got a lot of baseball to go, but they could at least come out of that in fairly good shape. But again, like you were saying, I mean, with whoever's left pitching, that's still a question left to be.
Can you imagine if this team loses either Grant Sherman or Chris Williams?
They're going to have to start using position players to pitch.
Well, Murph, let me ask you, how do you compare this baseball team with the injuries they've dealt with compared to the basketball team the second year of Coach Dawkins, where they had injuries that was a galore? I mean, it seems like it's a very parallel, and I know fans don't want to hear that. They think it's an excuse, but this was already a year where you had to replace certain pieces to begin with from last year's team, and then when you lose the personnel that this team has lost, it just seems it's just one of those years that you just throw your hands up, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I will say, basketball 2 years ago suffered more significant losses in terms of injuries because of the players they lost. UCF, you're not losing. And the baseball side, they haven't lost Tyler Osick and Grant Sherman and Matthew Micah, the guys who are really important to the team. They've lost integral, guys off the bench and guys in the bullpen bridge area, 6th, 7th, 8th innings that they could really help, shorten games. Those guys don't get a lot of stats that you look at, but they're important pieces to winning games. Those are the guys that they've lost. And I'll also say this too, guys who are healthy, to go about the trust that Lovelady has in the guys who are remaining there. You've got Kemp. He's very good. He's got a 1.33 ERA. He's striking out a ton. He'll be back this weekend, so that's really good. But Jack Sinclair and Jalen Whitehead came in last night in the 6th inning after Jordan Spicer, who has been dreadfully inconsistent for basically his entire UCF career, but certainly this season as well. He pitched 5 really solid innings. UCF, or Lovelady, called upon Jalen Whitehead and Jack Sinclair. They each faced 2 batters. They threw a total of 12 pitches. There was a walk. There was a home run. There was a triple, I believe. It was a mess. None of them got an out. And after the game, Lovelady was talking about the game and talking about that 4-run 6th inning that FAU put together that really decided the game. And he put the blame on himself, but he said it so, and by saying, I put some guys there who should not have been pitching in that game. Meaning, he doesn't trust those guys. Even the guys who are healthy, there's a lack of trust there. So even there's just so few options in that bullpen. And again, this is how this team has won games. This is how this team won game 2 years ago with guys like J.J. Montgomery and Bryce Tucker and Jason Barr. And so now they have really a shell of that. And their offense, was never expected to be world beaters. And now they have to pick up the slack, and I just don't think they have the horses outside the top 4 to really pick up the pitching because their offense was never made to score 6-7 runs a game. They were a pitching first team, and this pitching staff has been absolutely obliterated.
Yeah.
Well, and look, I mean, Chris Williams missed the first 9 games due to the whole NCAA thing, and I know that's not an injury, Murph, but that affects a pitcher's routine and rhythm and getting into the season. You're joining the season in progress. You mentioned the Holloway injury. I mean, it just seems like it's one thing after another. It's like, what's next type of thing.
It is, and Chris Williams actually was demoted a few weeks ago because he just wasn't pitching very well. He got moved back from the Friday start to the Saturday start because, frankly, he wasn't doing very well. Now, he wasn't great against Cincinnati on Saturday, the first game of the doubleheader, but he has been very good in the last 3 or 4 outings. Sherman has been like pristine good. So those have been the 2 guys you really count on. And otherwise, it has just been a slog. The offense has really slowed down. Ray Alejo is in a has been hitting around 200 for the last 11 or 12 games. These guys are hitting the ball hard sometimes, but they're just going right to fielders. It's been rough, and there was some optimism coming out of that USF series a couple of weeks ago. They had won 4 or 5. It seemed like they had finally turned something around. They had gone on the road to beat Jacksonville. They had won their first conference series, and now all of that is lost. And plus, you're adding Holloway to the medic list. It just feels like this team is searching for something right now. And if you could possibly see a very ugly weekend at Wichita State, especially for a 10:30 local time Saturday finale game. Oh my God.
What is it with Wichita State and these bizarre start times? Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 7 p.m., 7 p.m., and 11:30 a.m. In at Wichita. That's 11:30 a.m. Eastern, and that's 10:30. You said 10:30 a.m. local in Wichita. Is that right?
10:30. That's 10:30 local, Jeffrey. Do you like baseball with your mimosas? Goodness gracious.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, I mean, it's a stupid question. But,
along with my Bailey's coffee, why not? Yeah, let's do it. All right, so, and then, they got Bethune-Cookman coming in on Tuesday at 3. A Tuesday game at 3, which is also just
sweet. Are you going to that, Burf? Nice lunch?
Maybe, yeah. I might be going to lunch and then some baseball. I mean, I like day baseball. I got to figure that out because they advertised that game last night at 6 o'clock. So I'm not sure if that's a schedule snafu or if there's a disconnect somewhere. I mean, again, even the promotions department, we're not even sure what's going on.
They got
everything's a mess.
Oh. Well,
man.
I will say this. I think the 3 o'clock might be accurate because I think, and Jeff knows about this having worked there, I believe that is the night that UCF's having their Swords Awards. You know what I'm talking about? The Student Athlete Awards thing with the swords,
I don't know that for sure.
No, I know. That's what I'm telling you.
Oh, you know? Okay. Yeah,
I believe that is that.
Quite possibly. That might be.
So I think they might have moved that up to a day game because they don't want to conflict with the awards. But I'm just speculating here. For all I know, maybe that is a misprint. Who knows? It's an odd start time nonetheless. So, we'll find out eventually.
Yeah. It's going to be.
If UCF Baseball SID Ian McDougal is listening to this, yes, I know what the schedule says, but it was advertised at 6 o'clock p.m. on the video board last night. I'm just saying, someone help a brother out. That's all I want to know.
Otherwise, you're just going to be stuck there the whole day. And
I'll be there. I'll know. Like the game will start at 6, but I won't find that out. So I'll get there like 2. I have to kill 4 hours. Can't wait.
They do have this thing called Twitter. They might tweet out what time the game is on that day.
Heaven forfend.
Hey guys, is there a baseball game? Anyone want to come out to play now? I could see Murph there. All right. Well, we've got that to wrap up, and then, I wanted to talk with Elo about softball here because, I don't know, man. It doesn't feel quite as desperate as baseball, but they're in a slide right now. They've lost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in a row, including getting swept in Tampa by South Florida.
Tampa. It was here. It
was okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, but it was here, which makes it even worse. I mean, South Florida's good. They're 10-2 in the league, 32-15, but this was kind of a show me series, man. And South Florida, they took care of business here on the road. So UCF is now tied for third in the American at 7-5 with Wichita, 28-14 overall. You were doing those games, Eric. What happened?
Well, I know this is very complicated analysis that you only get here on Black and Gold Banneret, but I think Murph can back me on this. If you don't score, you're not going to win. Literally.
Thank you for that, Coach Madden.
A analysis.
Okay. UCF scored 1 run in 27 innings that weekend. They played a 13-inning marathon on Friday night, which was a classic. It was Georgina Corrick, Aaliyah White pitched two of the best pitchers in the conference, in the country, went toe-to-toe, went lengthy to the point where I was at the Hall of Fame ceremony. When that ended, I got back to the complex, and it was still in the 10th inning. That's how lengthy it was going. But, USF got a 2-run homer in the 13th inning, and they just, UCF's offense just struggled all weekend against the USF pitching. 1 run in 27 innings. If you go back to the Sunday game against Wichita State the week before, they had 1 run in the last 33 innings. So they've hit a bad time to hit a slump offensively. And part of it is not hitting with runners in scoring position. They had bases loaded and nobody out in the first inning in Sunday's game against USF and struck out. They tried to squeeze play, and which forced the force out at home plate. And then I believe they struck out at the end of the inning or popped up. I don't remember. I kind of drew a blank at that point. But the point is they didn't score. And that's the problem. They've had chances. They haven't delivered the hit. And they struggled against a very good USF pitching team. We said last week runs would be at a premium, and it was. It wasn't like, UCF's pitching, it's the complete opposite of what Murph's seen over there in baseball. The pitching's been fine. They're still among the nation's best in ERA and things like that. But they are struggling offensively. And it's not going to get easier because now they got to go to Tulsa this weekend, who's also got good pitching. So they got to figure some things out, how to create some runs for their pitching staff. But that's really the end of the story. If you don't score, you're not going to win, and that's what happened with UCF. Did
you feel that they just came face-to-face with reality here? Because, we know South Florida is a good team, but, UCF's still in the middle of this, coaching transition. Let's give them credit. They're still 47th in the RPI, but if these two match up in the conference championship, in the conference tournament, I should say, at some point, is it one of those things where it's like, look, if UCF is able to take this, it's going to be an upset? Or do you feel like these were just 3 coin flip games, at least at this point, and it was just it was just not being timely with the bats?
Yeah, I don't think it was like USF was that superior. I don't think this was a
They're
situation.
24th in the RPI, by the way.
Yeah, again, if UCF gets some timely hitting, you sort of easily won the Friday game. And I believe if they win the Friday game, it's a completely different series. But once they lost that game in 13 innings and they didn't get any runs early in the Saturday game, I think what happens is players tend to press. And I think you saw some of that with some of their hitters were pressing, trying to find that hit, trying to, maybe overthinking it. And, it's tough. USF has great pitching. They've always played low-scoring games. But I don't think it was a situation where, hey, that team was far superior. Not at all. It's just, unfortunately, they have hit a slump here hitting-wise. They've hit the wall, if you will, struggles in their bats. And they got to figure out a way to score some runs. This is the part of the schedule where we kind of knew what was coming here. You had USF at Tulsa, and who hosts Houston. There's 2 midweeks in between that with FIU and Bethune next weekend. But 9 of those games are all against top 50 teams in the RPI. And if you want to be an NCAA tournament team, you got to win some of those games. I felt they needed to go 5-4, something to that extent. Because you look at UCF's resume, yeah, they got a 47 RPI. They're in the bubble right now, but they have 1 win right now against the top 50 in the RPI, and that was Ohio State in February. And that's the disappointing thing about the USF game. And I've always said this in softball more so than in baseball. Avoid getting swept. Because if you take a game from USF this weekend, while that's not great, at least you get a quality win out of that, and it does help your resume.
Yeah. And you only lose the 1 game, too, instead of losing 3 games in the standings. Right.
Correct. And so, but now they have another opportunity. Tulsa's in the 20s, I believe, RPI-wise. I think they're 23 or something like that. So this is an opportunity on the road. You can win the series. That's huge for your resume. I think the conference championship's out the window now. They're basically 3 back of USF in the loss column, plus they lose the tiebreaker. That's going to be hard to catch up in 9 games, but in the conference play. But if they can get some wins here against Tulsa and Houston, they can play themselves back into the NCAA tournament. If they don't, if they continue to struggle, then they're going to be basically win conference tournament mode to get to the tournament or else. And, it's disappointing because you've had tremendous pitching this year from Aaliyah White, who's on the top of most of the categories in the nation in wins. ERA, they're one of the top teams ERA-wise this year. So you would hate to waste that and not make the tournament, but they got to find some consistent offense, and some of the hitters have to start hitting if they want to get to the NCAA tournament, if they want to make some noise in the conference tournament in Houston. And that's got to start this weekend against Tulsa. It's very imperative they get going here soon. Otherwise, the season could get away from them.
And what doesn't make it any easier, you mentioned the conference tournament. At least with UCF baseball, they get into the tournament, they get double elimination to sort of, you kind of get a mulligan at some point if you slip up. But the softball tournament, and you and I have debated this before, single elimination. So if you end up having to get into that situation like you were talking about, Elo, where you have to win the conference tournament, boy, that can that's. You never say never, but the likelihood of that is the percentage chances really start to drop at that point. Is that right?
Yeah, and then what's frustrating, again, UCF ranks 10th in the country. 10th in the country. I could just hear Murph right now just salivating. 10th in the country in ERA. 10th. It's the best they've had from a statistical standpoint since 2015, when they were number one in the country, when they had two All-Americans in Audis and Turnier, and they obviously won 50 games, so it's a completely different team. But the point is, boy, to have the 10th best ERA in the country and a pitcher that's among the nation's leaders in wins and innings, and boy, you would like to cash in usually, because you have a chance to win every game. With Aaliyah in the circle, you have a chance to win. But if you don't, again, I know I'm not being condescending here at all. I'm not trying. Usually I am. I'm very sarcastic a lot of times on this program. But this is not one of them.
And on Twitter, too, I should add. But anyway.
Correct. But I'm not. If you don't score runs, if you don't score more than one run in 27 innings a series, you're not going to win. And that's the problem.
Yeah. Man, it's tough. That's
Murph, maybe now's the time. Maybe Murph, you and Lovelady, and maybe Coach Ball. Maybe we can make a trade. You guys give us a bat. We give you an arm. Maybe
that'd be great. I will say, UCF that 10th in ERA sounds like UCF baseball last year when I think they were among the top 10 in ERA.
Yeah.
See, I don't have to worry about that problem now because UCF is only in the top 25 in one stat in the nation. I swear to God, this is true. They're in the top 25 in one stat in the entire nation, and it's sacrifice bunts.
Really? Wow.
Really? Now they are.
Is there one stat where you just don't? Is that the one stat in baseball that you look at and you're like, man, I really don't want in this day and age. I really don't want that one. Please, no.
I mean, the team bunts. Like, look, if any of them are listening to this, I will say, every time they bunt, it makes my skin crawl. I really just it really does. It takes the life out of me. I will say they're also ranked. They're also among the top 20 in shutouts, but you're like tied with like 30 other teams at like 2. So that doesn't really count. That shouldn't count. So anyway, yeah, it's not been a good year. Anyway, that's like my point being is that, softball is wasting an opportunity with the pitching staff they have. Baseball, it doesn't really have like that waste opportunity because the entire team from front to back has been pretty mediocre.
Yeah. Well,
so who should feel worse then, Murph? Is it baseball should feel worse? Should I feel worse? Like,
you know what, Eric? Here's what I'm thinking. With softball struggling, baseball, struggling. We've talked about men's basketball's future, which looks rough. We talked about women's basketball future, where there was a lot of players next year. I swear to God, the most impactful thing on the show might have actually been spring football talk, which is nuts.
Hello, we got 2 tennis teams on the verge of making the tournament.
Oh my God!
Here we go. Well, a segue. We will talk about that, and we will talk a little bit about golf, and we will talk about the UCF Athletics Hall of Fame inductions, which just took place in just a little bit. Stick around. The Black and Gold Banneret Podcast is back after this. Welcome back to the show. Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez, Brian Murphy with you. UCF_Banneret is our Twitter handle. That's where you can follow us to get all the latest from UCF sports, including, gentlemen, it's the not the club sports, but the country club sports championship weeks here in the American. And it started with UCF women's golf. They were in the American Athletic Conference Women's Championship up at Hammock Beach in Palm Coast. They finished in second place. Houston, who is ranked number 34 in the country, ran away and hid. They were minus 13 as a team. UCF finished in second, but they were 30 strokes back. That's nothing against UCF. That just shows you how good of a week Houston had. So they get the automatic bid to the NCAAs, and we got to wait to see where UCF women's golf goes now. For the NCAA, assuming that they get an invite to begin with. Now, the men's golf championship, I did want to get everyone a heads up on that. That's in Palm Harbor. It's going to be at Innisbrook, and it's going to be this coming Sunday through Tuesday, April 21st through the 23rd. And we'll be keeping an eye out on that one on the leaderboard for you on our Twitter account at UCF_Banneret. But congrats to head coach Emily Marin of UCF Women's Golf, leading them to a second place finish in the conference. And also the individual players, Elizabeth Moon, who is ranked 81st in the country. She finished in second, 2 strokes back of the individual medalist winner. That was Leonie Harm, also of Houston. She's ranked 10th in the country, by the way. She finished at -8 over the 3-round tournament. So congratulations to Liz. Also, Maria Balcazar finished in the top 12. She finished tied for 12th at 5 over. So that's hey, second place for the team event, second place for the individual event. Not that bad. And we got men's golf championship coming up. All right, tennis. It's championship week for tennis, Eric Lopez, and the women's tournament got underway today. In fact, now UCF had the bye to Thursday. So they will play Thursday at noon in the quarterfinals against Memphis, who beat Temple in the 8-9 matchup 4-0. UCF at noon. By the way, the tennis championships are here in Orlando at the USTA National Campus down by Lake Nona, and they will take place at, well, not the exact same time, but coinciding with the men's tennis championship, which actually starts tomorrow with the first round. With 2 matches, UConn versus Temple, SMU versus ECU. UCF is the 1 seed coming in, and they will play the winner of SMU and ECU on Friday. So how about UCF tennis here, Eric Lopez? They are the 1 seed in both the men's and the women's. Let me ask you this. Which team do you think has the better shot to win which team has the better shot to win the conference overall? They're both 1 seeds. Who would you be surprised by the most if they flame out?
I would kind of go with the women's as the more right, because the men's has USF, which is always a powerhouse in men's tennis, things like that. Whereas the women's been kind of rock solid all year round. The men's kind of been streaking down the stretch. By the way, we are on the verge of history here because both the men's and the women are pretty much going to be in the NCAA tournament together in the same year, which I don't think has ever happened before. I'm not going to say for sure because I just know that women's hadn't made it until 2002 up until last year, and you know this, Jeff, because you covered tennis for a while. It's not like the 2 tennis programs were powerhouses, but both sides are in great shape. There's a site called collegetennisranks.com. I know Murph's bookmarking it as we speak, because they have NCAA projections, folks. Yeah, nothing like NCAA. It. You got it?
I got it up. All right.
And men's tennis and women's tennis are both going to be in.
Yeah.
Pretty comfortably.
I'm looking at the women's. It's like a database. It takes a second to populate here.
Yep. It's fancy.
Yeah, they are projecting. Let's see, UCF. They're looking at projected rank 25th, so they're expecting them to get 25th in the country. Yeah, I mean, it's looking pretty good for both.
And that's good because,
squads, right?
for example, the cut line, they have a projections where they do a cut line, where they do a cut line on who's going to be left out, and usually, they follow it based on ranking, so it's pretty accurate. It's like 99.9% accurate. So, like the cut line, for example, on the women's side is like 42 RPI ranking, basically, or 42 ranking, and you just mentioned where the women's are at 25. And then the men's projections for the NCAA tournament bubble, as I look at this, I mean, this is just, and they take into
27th, right? Or they're currently 28th. They're projected to be 27th.
And the bubble is like 42. Like LSU right now is the last team projected to be in men's tennis at 42, for example. So the point is, both the men and the women are going to be in the tournament. That is a remarkable achievement and story that is the most underplayed UCF story, and I get it. Everybody's like, well, who cares about tennis? But
we should start caring about tennis as a fan base because
this was a huge project, and this is the most impressive thing that Danny White has done in his career at UCF. I know, he gets a lot of the hoopla with the football hires, and I get the importance and all that, but he turned two tennis programs. First of all, that I don't know, Jeff, you describe it, you cover it, because I want to be respectful to the previous coaches, and it wasn't their fault. It was just.
Let's say they were underinvested.
They were practicing. They were playing at rec centers, right? At a rec, basically.
The programs were not invested in very much by the university. I will say that.
And they have moved to where they're playing at this beautiful
not the
facility.
fault of the coaches.
Right, and they're playing in this new facility in Lake Nona at the College USTA Center, which is like a mecca now for tennis. It's created so many great matches in tennis and college tennis. There's going to be even professional world team tennis teams are going to be playing there now as well. There's actually an Orlando franchise there if you want to get your tickets there, the Orlando Storm, I think it's called, or whatever, for the world team tennis. But the point is, you got UCF men's and women's tennis there playing at home, and they're both going to make the tournament. They're both going to be perennial NCAA tournament teams in a facility that's going to host the conference championships this weekend again for the second time, I think, in 3 years. And it's a home that's going to be home to the NCAA championships here in a couple of years as well. And Danny White kind of saw the vision in this. I'll never forget when I was shocked when he hired John Roddick out of Oklahoma. It's incredible. People were stunned. It shocked the entire tennis landscape, and he made him the director of tennis. And then give John Roddick credit because he hired Brian Konecko, the women's tennis coach.
Mm-hmm.
Unbelievable.
So this is going to be fun to watch the next couple weeks.
Are we going out there this weekend? Are we going out there?
I would like
I feel like we talk about this every week on the podcast. When are we going to go out there?
I have a date. Listen, the Drive Shack is out there, right? On Friday?
Yes.
Let's go on Friday, and then we'll hang out at the Drive Shack, and we'll have a good time.
I can't go.
Why not?
Because I have a play to go to.
I have a Magic playoff game to cover. By the way, Jeff, if you look at the
what
radar,
happens, people.
Hold on.
What happens?
Hold on, Jeffrey. We're doing you a favor because I'm shocked that you didn't know this as a weather guy yourself here. The weather's not looking good Friday. Let's just say that. It's bad when the Orlando Magic send you an email and say, hey, might be a good idea to come out early here since the weather's not going to be very good.
What are they saying? It's going to be
like 100% chance of rain with like winds of 20 miles an hour.
So it's going to be possible severe weather. Oh, fantastic. All right. That's exactly.
We may not. I have a feeling that the tennis schedule might get pushed back into Saturday, Sunday finish.
You might be right. Well, we might have 2 championships decided on Sunday. How fun would that be?
Yeah, that'd be good.
That would be a lot of fun. It's been fun seeing UCF get some play on the national airwaves on the tennis channel, both the men's and the women's teams this year. With the by the way, you can follow the tennis championships live on theamerican.org. They will be broadcasting those tennis matches from the USTA National campus from the USTA National campus on the American Digital Network. Plus, the men's final will be Sunday. Is scheduled for Sunday at noon. The women's final is scheduled for Saturday at 3. But like you were saying, Eric, they've got those 2 semifinals scheduled for Friday at 3 p.m. I'm looking at the forecast, and they might not get that in. 50% chance of showers at that point. So Yeah, I would not be surprised one bit if they either move those up into the morning
Right.
and try and get them done early so that they can keep to the schedule, or do they just push everything back a day? I know they really don't want to do that because of the travel expenses and all, but I don't know. It's going to be a tough call for the American to make. But either way, plenty of tennis to be had down at the USTA complex. Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. Now, last but far from least, probably our favorite event of the year, the UCF Athletics Hall of Fame inductions. It's been 4 years since we've done this. I was at the last one along with you, Eric. I couldn't make it this time. You were there. Congrats once again to the 6 inductees. Drew Butera, whose father Sal was there to induct him because Drew obviously is working in Major League Baseball as a catcher or actually I think he's still at Albuquerque. Is that right, Brian?
He just got called up,
Jeff.
Yeah,
he got called up. Oh,
that's
okay,
right, brother.
Good.
It's a big leaguer.
Right. I didn't see that.
Drew Butera is officially a 10-year major leaguer.
He's a 10-year guy, but he's not a 10-5 guy. Unfortunately,
no, I don't think so. No, because he's not with one team. But he has now been a part of a major league team for 10 seasons.
Yeah. In addition to that, our good friend Allison Trella, the former Allison Keim, also another good friend of ours from long time when I was doing video work at UCF, Alini Reyes was inducted as well. And then 3 names in football, obviously Brandon Marshall, Kevin Smith, and George O'Leary. We talked to Allie, we talked to Kevin, we talked to Aline, and we got some. And actually, Eric, you were fortunate enough, as you were there, to get some sound from each of those guys. But first, just tell us about the ceremony itself, because I was at the 2015 one. It was a lot of fun to see. It was really great to see everybody there, everybody who was there at once celebrating these new inductees. How was this one different, and what was it like for those of us who didn't see many of the highlights?
It was definitely bigger than 2015. It was in the Doubletree Hotel in the ballroom there. Much more space than the Alumni Center where you and I were at 4 years ago. So, I was able to get a seat, and it was comfortable because there was a lot of people there. And it was really a blast because it's probably the only event that I can think of where you could have the past and the present of UCF, and even to some extent the future, all there in one place. I mean, here I am, and I'm watching, because the way they do it, they have all the Hall of Famers there. There's past Hall of Famers that make the trip. Then you got current people at UCF, like for example, you have Josh Heupel there talking to George O'Leary, for example. You have Amanda Cromwell
was there.
Yeah, Mackenzie Milton was there. There was Amanda Cromwell made the trip because of Alini Reyes, so you had her there, but you also had Tiffany Roberts Zahadak there. You had Todd Dagenet there. It was just a cool thing to see the present of UCF and the past of UCF kind of mingle a little bit, and really being honored. And I got to give credit to John Kavadik and a lot of people behind the scenes on that. I could tell you in talking to all of the inductees, they were very happy, felt very welcome, and very appreciative of everything there, what they've done there. And it was a cool event. Mark Daniels emceed it. They did the video packages there. They didn't do an introduction speaker. You know how Jeff last year, 4 years ago, they would have people like Tipner would induct. They kind of skipped that. They just kind of had Mark introduce each person. Probably for timing purposes or whatever.
No, probably because O'Leary was, everyone was running on O'Leary time, get in and get out, right?
Well, except for O'Leary. I mean, everybody was on a quote 5-minute, time limit, except George went 18 minutes. But yeah, it was, yeah. But it was cool though. I mean, Sal Butera, as you mentioned, was the first speaker on behalf of Drew. He got emotional about that. And for people that don't know, Sal is obviously a long time history of baseball. So he was there representing Drew. Yeah, exactly. And then Allison spoke. She got emotional there. She was there with her family. Stephanie Best was there as well to see her get inducted. And then Brandon Marshall spoke. And the cool thing about Brandon, this is a guy that is very well, probably one of the most, would you guys say is one of the most recognizable UCF alums as far as athletes are concerned, as far as people know who Brandon Marshall is. Would you agree with that? he's a pretty big time guy now.
Yes.
Yeah.
People
Yeah.
know
Well,
who
certainly. Yeah. He's got the championship belt, shall we say, among UCF football alumni.
And the cool thing about it, though, he walks in and he still talks. He knows everybody. Like, he walks into this we had a media availability right before the ceremony, and he walks in. He notices our friend Brandon Hellwig from UCFsports.com, gives him a hug and asks him, how you doing? You're still doing this deal? Because they go way back to when, Brandon was being recruited. Right. And here's Brandon Marshall, an NFL star. I mean, I don't know the last time he saw Brandon, but he remembered a Brandon Hellwig who covered him back when he was being recruited. And Brandon was still talking to his advisor and Manny. And then that's the cool thing about with Brandon that I thought was awesome was you just didn't – you would not have known that this was a superstar NFL player that's been a Pro Bowler that you could maybe make a case that is going to go into the NFL Hall of Fame. But he still had the passion and, he still follows the program. And that was cool. And then, Kevin Smith – Leni Reyes spoke after that, and she was fantastic with her history there, of course, playing on the Brazilian national team. Interestingly enough, one thing we learned is she actually travels her dog everywhere she goes. So,
yeah.
So the dog was there. Yeah. So she was a blast. And then Kevin Smith, who I thought was the best speaker of the night, was phenomenal. The one line I'll never forget. And by the way, all these things UCF has made available on YouTube, so you can actually watch the speeches, which I think is cool. He made this great line, and I'm paraphrasing it, but basically, I hope I'm invited back when my other future Knights brothers get inducted, like the Griffins, and the Miltons. That doesn't give you some chills. I don't know what does. That was awesome, and the guy is fantastic. And then obviously George wrapped things up with being George, talking for about 18 minutes.
Unscripted.
Poking a little fun at people, because Brandon Marshall mentioned on his speech about how his roommates and his former players, and there was a female roommate. And so when George came up, he's like, well, I didn't know about a female roommate. I would have known. I took the lessons there. So he teased him a little bit.
Oh,
he told Danny White, like, Danny, I know we got financial issues, but, these plaques could be bigger. So George was typical George, but he was appreciative of it as well. And that was the cool thing about the whole night was that everybody we just got to hear some of the bets of all time. And then you see these coaches there like Josh Heupel talking to George and things like that. It was a cool night. I liked this night a lot. Interestingly, Danny White, who spoke at this, made reference to the fact that it looks like they're going to try and make this now a yearly thing. This is now going to be a yearly thing here, guys. So we might be having a Hall of Fame every year during the spring.
I really hope so. I don't know how many they plan on inducting each time, but I really do hope that they make that a yearly thing because it should be a yearly thing. And I know that now that they, if that's true and they are making that commitment to make it an annual event, that's a wonderful way to sort of celebrate sort of a second homecoming, I think, afterwards. So
I agree.
Yeah, I think that's a very good job by Danny White if that's going to happen, and it'll give us a chance to actually talk, build up to that and maybe see who else gets nominated. I wonder when the nomination process opens up.
Well, I'll tell you, hopefully they do it. Yeah, hopefully they could give it more time and things like that. Plus all our content, Black Gold Banneret will not be. We'll just bring that back up. Because I do have
content
some thoughts.
Farms, baby.
I think if you look at next year, some early kind of little guesses for next year. Kevin Smith made reference to Josh Sitton, who just retired from the NFL.
Yeah.
Recently. Could he be in the mix for a Hall of Fame induction next year from a football standpoint? I think Amanda Crumwell, who was ironically there, I think could be one of the front runners to get in next year. Because I think you're going to see some run of women's soccer players make the Hall of Fame here in the next few years. So does a basketball player make it? That's going to be an interesting question. I mean, obviously, a lot of people are asking about Jermaine Taylor. But remember, there's certain criteria you have to make. One of them being you have to have your degree. And if you don't have your degree, you're not eligible. And I think that's kind of what's Jermaine's situation. Otherwise, he would have been in. But it's going to be fascinating to see how this evolves, because I know you've talked about this. The long-term plan is they're going to have a Hall of Fame building, right?
Now, did they confirm? Well, I was going to ask you that. Did anyone actually confirm that there was going to be a physical Hall of Fame?
No, but I think it's been implied. So I think
Okay.
it's kind of like, let's wait till this thing is once we know this thing is like good to go, we'll promote it big.
Because what I've heard is it is going to exist in that building that they're putting up between the Nicholson Fieldhouse and the Wayne Dench Center. That it's going to sort of be like an athletics office hub. And don't quote me on this. I heard that it would be like on the first floor. Seems to me like it would be like there would be like some sort of grand entryway with that there, right? So with the plaques there. So, but I don't know 100% for sure. I hopefully somebody from UCF Athletics, if you're listening, just hit us up and just make sure about that, because I think that it should. I mean, you never know, these buildings that everything changes, right? But yeah, it should be a place that people can go to, and if it's in that place, then that means people can visit it on game days, walking up to the stadium, which would be kind of cool.
Yeah, no, I think it'd be cool. And another couple of notes. Allison was honored on Saturday at the softball game. They unveiled a banner with a number 10 in the left field foul pole area, right next to the Stephanie Best number 3. She was inducted there in softball there, and then her, as we mentioned earlier, her and Alini Reyes and Brandon Marshall were honored before the spring game. George was not there, as I mentioned. I'm not being funny. He actually did drive back home and actually hosted, I believe it was the women's golf team, because I guess they were participating in the championships nearby where he's living.
Yeah. Because he used to live in Ponce Inlet, I know, and he sold that house, and I think he lives in Palm Coast now. And they were playing the tournament in Palm Coast, so he had them over, and that was nice. I thought that was really good by George and Sharon O'Leary to do that.
George did say that he will plans on attending more football games. He is not a good fan on TV. He says he calls too many timeouts when he's watching the games on TV. And he was a big endorser of Josh Heupel. As a matter of fact, here in the media availability here, George talks about the job that Josh Heupel did last year, and maybe deserve more credit. Here is George O'Leary from the media availability at the Hall of Fame ceremony about Josh Heupel.
Well, Josh, very mature guy, and obviously he's been there, done it, and well-organized practice, and he moves the field well, and that's what I look at. Are they practicing? What are they getting done? And I'm very happy with him, and I think it was a very good choice by Danny to select him as the coach, and great season last year. Tough under those circumstances going in, following an undefeated season, and I thought he held up very well and did an outstanding job.
And that was George O'Leary, and he actually mentioned Heupel in the ceremony there, where he was trying to hey, Josh, I want you to commit to the program, and then Josh followed up with, I agree with you, Coach, the plaques are too small. So it was a pretty funny line. But it was interesting because George has said he's been to a Josh Heupel practice and things. So I feel like Josh Heupel has probably kind of opened the doors to George here a little bit, without kind of speculating too much. But that was very interesting, kind of some of the interesting dialogue that you would get from George there. And then of course Kevin Smith. Kevin Smith obviously being inducted is obviously the FAU running back coach. UCF's going to play at FAU, 7:00 kick, by the way. Kevin talked about playing UCF and what happened last year. Here was Kevin Smith's thoughts on the UCF FAU game.
We got to play better. I mean, I like, I haven't talked about that game, but I like where we were at. We came on the road. We were down 14 quick. Obviously, we know the power of their offense, and they played good defensive ball. We went on a 17-0 run, and in that stadium with those fans that I'm well aware of, you have to capitalize, and one thing you can't do is get a ball to them with that offense, and that's what we did, and they show why why UCF is UCF. So bottom line, when we get them this year in our house, we just got to play better, and obviously it's going to come down to talent and coaching. So we're excited.
That was Kevin Smith thoughts there on the FAU game, and it was interesting hearing Kevin answer that question about he kind of knew what to expect. They dug themselves a hole. He liked where they were when they scored those 17 straight points. He thought they hung in there, and he just felt they gave him too many chances. But he feels that they got a chance if they play better and coach better. But it was an interesting answers that Kevin gave there about that football game last year. He felt pretty good about it, and I think he feels good going into this year.
Yeah. We also heard I did see, what was fun was I saw We saw Mackenzie Milton there, and he was glad-handing with everybody. I want to go back to Brandon real quick because there seemed to be like a little bit of an element of finality to it, but he says he's not done yet, right?
Correct. He kind of left the door open because they asked him about it. Like, hey, you know, are you going to hang out? He's like, we'll see. I don't know. I think I still got something left in me. So he kind of teased it as a left it open there a little bit. He's obviously putting a word out for the mental health because obviously he had to deal with that.
Yeah.
That was a big case there. But, you know, he was just excited and about UCF being back at UCF. And he still follows UCF. As he talked about here in the clip we'll play, he talked about the success that UCF has, and it's how it's grown.
Surprised, but I am a little shocked that it happened so fast, right? Like, I mean, it's Florida. You know, we're a talented state in all sports, boys and girls, so I'm not surprised. But that just says a lot to what the guys before us have done, you know, going back to Coach Cruz, going back to Jimmy Frizzell, Doug Gabriel, and Dante Culpepper, and Coach Becton, Richard Jefferson. You can go on and on and on. Santi Samuels, Elton, I already said Elton. So what those guys were able to do, you know, they gave us the opportunity to be the first to go to a bowl game, right? And then, you know, being national champions now is just remarkable.
That was Brandon Marshall there. Looked very dapper, as you would expect, sharp. It was cool to hear him talk about how he was the defensive back who was playing safety, and Mike Sims Walker was at corner because George said he would have made a great safety in the NFL, and then Brandon's like, I get it, but I'm happy I'm a wideout.
Yeah, I think it worked out.
Yeah, it did, but it was cool to hear Brandon. Brandon is still very involved with UCF, and still you could hear it in his voice, passionate about UCF. It was just awesome to see him catch up with a lot of people there that helped them get to the way they all mentioned the academic advisor that helped them during the process.
Christy Belden.
Yes, she got mentioned a lot. In fact, it was funny. They joked about how she always would text him, and she texted him today about the speech and everything like that. And it was just awesome to see them still not forget where they came from. And I think that's the cool thing from that. And I hope we continue to do this more, and I hope it continues to grow more, because I know there's a lot of fans and a lot of the fan base that, you know, think that 2 years ago was the start of UCF football. And while the last few years have been unbelievable for the football program, we've had a lot of great football players and success prior to that, long time prior to that. We're talking during the O'Leary era. We're talking about the Gene McDowell era. Just a lot of great history that I hope people appreciate, that have helped pave the way to where UCF is now.
Yeah, absolutely right. Real quick before we go, and I want to throw this open to the both of you. Let's say they choose 5 people for next year. Who do you think should get in?
I have no idea.
Oh, come on.
I've not thought of this at one bit.
Well, I have.
Come on. Eric has. I got my own thoughts too. Go ahead, Eric. Who do you got?
Well, I think Amanda Cromwell jumps at the list. In fact, if you force me to pick one, if I had to put money on the line and say who will be in this class next year, I think Amanda Cromwell will be it because of her resume. And the women's soccer history, success, I think she'll be in there. You know, after that, it gets kind of interesting. I know, Jeff, I'll defer to you. There's some volleyball players that are up for it. And one that right now I'm having a hard time remembering how to pronounce her name. It's Rorotska or something like that. It is really, this was before Delana Sarton, but it was about a decade ago that's been kind of maybe brought up from a volleyball standpoint. But I would say I'll let you figure that out while I kind of think of my head. I think Josh Sitton, I mentioned, could be a strong candidate. You know, if they stick to their rules here with 7 years, you know, like if Blake Bortles has his degree, does he become eligible? I don't know. Maybe he's a year or two away.
See, I don't know if Blake has his degree. I would hope that he and Jermaine, if they haven't, have at least begun the process of coming back to kind of finish up. I know Brandon finished his degree in the off season. Is that right?
I believe so. Yeah. So I think Josh Sitton. I think Josh Sitton, I would make a heavy favorite just because of his NFL success, which does, that does play a factor in this as far as certain categories. So I think he's a factor. So I would say Cromwell and Sitton are the front runners. Basketball wise, it just kind of gets tricky at that point because, I guess technically a Keith Clanton would be eligible. But again, what happens with Jermaine Taylor? The thing is, I'm not a fan, by the way, of the degree, having a degree being mandatory to get into the Hall of Fame, because I don't see a scenario where a men's soccer player or track and field star is going to make the Hall of Fame if that's the case, because a lot of them have to leave early for their professional jobs and their careers, like track and field. If you want to make, you want to have a career in men's soccer, you go pro early a lot of times. So I think we have to soften that a little bit, I hope, down the road, because a lot of these athletes come to UCF we all come to UCF because you want to improve your chances of getting the job in your whatever profession. Well, what if that profession basically has you leaving early and you don't finish your degree? I don't think that's fair.
I get it. I get it. Like it's because it's a university's athletic department Hall of Fame. And if the university's message is you want to come here, excel in your sport, and be set for the rest of your life education-wise, because that's why you're there. If they're selling that ideal, then I totally get it. And it also provides the incentive of, hey, it doesn't mean you're ineligible. Just come back and finish off your degree. There's a number of different ways you can do that in the offseason, as Brandon Marshall has. Dante Culpepper finished his degree after his playing career was up, and I know George O'Leary was instrumental in doing that for the both of them. I think Kevin also finished his degree.
Well, Kevin was different because Kevin had to have a degree if he wanted to go into coaching, and he actually talked about that. So that's a different scenario because he wanted to.
When he was a GA here, he finished his degree. So
correct.
Right. So yeah, but I see what you mean, but I do think. Surprise! I disagree with you, Eric.
No.
I do think it's the right criteria to have, because it doesn't cloud the mission of the university, which, let's face it, if it's not for the university, the athletic department doesn't exist. So that's where
But I would argue that if the person leaves early, has a great career and helps the university exposure, that's, the university gets something out of it. I think just because you didn't get a piece of paper does not mean that you didn't contribute to the university. Well, we could go back and forth on that. I think there's some interesting questions too that've got to be cleaned up that will be interesting. For example, the Gene McDowell situation.
I think that's the
does
big
that
one
situation get cleared up? Do they get rid of the felony rule where if you have a felony, because that's why he's not in there, is because of his felony. Because I guess he lied under oath, or supposedly, or was proven to be.
The whole thing that actually ended up costing him his career at UCF.
Correct. So that's a hot topic. Does that change? Do we see a Jay Bergman down the road get in? I think Clay Tipner is probably the next guy. If you want to look at baseball, could be the next guy that gets in, possibly, or maybe a Chris Duffy or Shane Brown. I could see one of those three getting in next year in baseball. What our mutual friend. I think the good news about this, if it's every year, that's going to help the case of people like Janae Shinhoster from softball that maybe has been looked over because of two icons in Best and Kime, maybe overshadowed. By having this every year, now you can maybe look back at her resume instead of 4 years from now we forgot because we have all these other softball people. So I think Shinhoster's in the mix, maybe a Natalie Land's in the mix from a softball standpoint. So those are some of the names that I think will be kind of discussed in next year. But if I had to bet two guarantees, is probably two people I would say would be Amanda Cromwell and I would say Josh Sitton.
I'm going all in on my old school. I think that one of the things that is happening is if they're going annual, that the old school guys, I think that helps out their case, because now it was like you talked about before, that if they were doing it every other year, that could lock some people out because of the classes that are coming in. But I'm still all in for Darren Slack. I'm still all in for Mark Giacone, and I'm all in for Steve Slack, Darren's dad, because the story that Darren told me about how he was instrumental in saving the program. I mean, it's entirely possible that in another parallel universe there is no UCF football because Darren's dad Steve decided not to step in and save it from financial ruin, and that's key. Like that to me, looking back at the history of it, that's the fork in the road moment for UCF's football program in terms of its existence was what he was able to do with the gate crashers in the 80s and saving UCF from the spectacular amount of debt that it was in at that time. In 80s terms, it was a lot of money. So, and he can get in as a contributor. I think Darren deserves to get in as a player. I think Mark deserves to get in as a player. I agree with you on Amanda. I think she's going to get in. Janae, I'm on the record as pulling for Janae. I want Janae to get in. After that, I think it really does get pretty interesting.
I'll give you another sleeper name. Latavius Murray could be a guy.
Yeah, Tate could be in. Yeah,
with his NFL career, I think his last year at UCF was like 2012, so I think he'll be eligible by next year. And I would assume he has his degree. I know we've seen him around. I could see Latavius being a factor there from a football standpoint, because I think there's always going to be a football or two. And I do think if this is an annual thing, that's going to help the cases of some of the old timers, because, and I don't think you're going to have 5 members every year. Maybe you will, but if you are, then that's going to help guys like, maybe you do something where you make sure there's a couple from the Olympic sports, maybe one from an old era and then the new era. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to do it.
Cool. All right. So we have some recap. I know, Eric, you have a recap of that's going on the site?
Oh, yes, I'll get around to it. Which is basically just kind of a cliff notes. You'll see some of the videos of the Hall of Fame and just kind of a cool weekend. And again, congrats to everybody involved in that. Yeah. It was cool. Like John, and again, John was tremendous because he literally, I saw him at the softball field. He made sure Allison got it honored with the banner, and then made sure she made it on time to the football game for the pregame ceremonies, which took place about at 2:15. He made sure everything went smoothly with Allison to be both at softball and at football. So credit to him and a lot of the people behind the scenes to make this a smooth thing for everybody.
Yeah, no, amen to that. Amen to that. All right, let's wrap this thing up. Murph, well, you're going to be following this baseball team as it tries to,
yay,
slog on through, man. It's but what else you got coming up?
Not going to Wichita though, for the record. He's not going to Wichita.
I'm not going to Wichita. I mean, I would certainly be going to Clearwater next month, but other than that, I do not see myself going on any baseball road trips in the near future. Other than that, boy, it sure is thin out here, isn't it? We are getting close to the summer. Certainly the weather out here in Orlando says spring is about to die. And thus we're gonna have to really. What did we do last summer for content, Jeffrey? I forgot. It's all a blur.
Well, the podcasts were all. We didn't write that much, but remember, we only have to do like one post a day now. So the podcasts were all the summer sessions.
Yo, so that's right. We do interviews
on that, right? Yeah. So
how about I go a 3 month warning on this? I'm trying to get a press pass for a late August Tampa Bay Rays game that'll feature the Seattle Mariners, which will hopefully have both Chasen Bradford and Dylan Moore on the Mariners roster at the time.
It's called Murph. It's called summer sessions, not fall sessions. You have to remember.
August, Jeffrey. August is in the summer. And so
remember, I gave you the heads up. UCF football is at Pittsburgh 2 days earlier. The Mariners will be in Pittsburgh. So
let's talk about this for 1 second. How cool! I'm definitely doing this if this is possible. Right. The day before UCF plays Pittsburgh in football at Pitt, the Mariners play the Pirates in PNC.
2 days earlier. 2 days earlier. It's a Thursday matinee.
Oh, that's gonna be tougher for me. I thought it was a Friday game. Saturday game. We'll see. But I don't know about that anymore. See, now I don't know if I want to be in Pittsburgh for 4 days.
Now you're out, right?
now I'm second guessing. Now I need to go sell the tickets I just bought to a Mariners Pirates game.
Come on, man.
Did you really buy tickets?
No, I did not buy tickets. It's a joke, Eric.
Oh, goodness. I know. Everything you would have said, I would have believed. I would have not have been shocked if you bought. You would have been the one person that would not have been shocked if you bought tickets this advance.
No. I mean, I was definitely only if that Pittsburgh game was on a Friday, I definitely would have been. It's a 12:35 start Thursday afternoon. Mariners Pirates. I've yet to be at PNC Park, which is maybe the most beautiful park in baseball. So anyway, this has nothing to do with anything, much less anything to do with UCF. But I wanted to let you all know that I might be going to Pittsburgh for a baseball game in September. So there's that.
Fabulous.
I mean, that is UCF related. It's right, for people that are going to make the trip.
It's UCF, it's UCF tangential. It's sort of somewhat related.
Elo,
by the way, since we had a 40-minute conversation with the Hall of Fame there, as you were listening off names about teams that are going in the Hall, guys who would go in the Hall of Fame or UCF athletes who go in the Hall of Fame, my problem is I don't know what the standard is for how good you have to be in the Hall of Fame. And I think we saw this year's it's not so much about what you did for UCF. Brandon Marshall was a very good player who had one outstanding season and really more one outstanding bowl game against Nevada. He gets into the Hall of Fame because he's a borderline NFL Hall of Famer.
Oh, yeah. He got in on a separate, but that's a separate category. See, they have two different categories. So, for example, Kevin Smith, Allison, and Aline got in based on their UCF careers, whereas, and George for that matter, whereas Brandon and Drew got in under, and I forget what it's called, the name it's called, some fancy word it's called, but it's called basically
Distinguished Knights or something like that.
Right, something to that extent where you've done beyond UCF. Beyond, because, obviously I've got a lot of questions about Butera, but let's face it. I mean, take it for what it's worth. There has not been a UCF baseball player that has had a more successful Major League Baseball career than Drew Butera. He is the most recognizable baseball player. I know people make fun of that.
That's fair.
He's played a decade in Major League Baseball, which I don't care who you are. That's impressive. I mean, you can speak to this. I mean, that's impressive.
It's amazing because he literally has a career OPS of 558, and he's played 10 years in the Major League. Look, I'm not making
casting aspersions on Drew Butera at the very end of this podcast.
God knows that Drew Butera is almost this close to taking out a restraining order on me because I stalk him everywhere he goes. Literally, I stalked him.
The Hall of Fame. He just assumed you were here.
I stalked him on both coasts, gentlemen. I went to a sporting goods store when he was on the Dodgers for an autograph session that Drew Butera held in Los Angeles, and I stalked him when he came down here for the Rays game against the Royals last year. I am literally Drew Butera's ghostwriter at this point. But it is amazing that he has lasted 10 years in the league. That tells you what defense and framing will do for you. I will say, among the names you mentioned, and I will just go off of baseball because it's what I'm most familiar with from the years back in 2006, 7, 8, 9. Chris Duffy literally had the year where he was one of the top 5 players in all of college baseball.
Golden Spike finalist, right?
In any way you want to cut it, he was one of the top 5 players in college baseball, and I think that alone should get you in the Hall of Fame. And that's what we don't have a lot of we don't have a whole lot of obvious picks. So why don't you just pick a guy who for 1 year was literally one of the best players in the sport? That's my 2 cents.
I'm all in for Duff, man. I think he deserves, and Shane Brown deserves to be in too. I think he should.
Shane Brown's another one. I mean, there's a lot of baseball guys for sure.
Yeah, I mean, but then you get to guys like Tyson Auer and Kiko Vasquez. They were good players, but Clay, Shane Brown's a nice player. Clay Tempner was a really consistent player, and he played in the Giants system for a few years. So and I think he got a cup of coffee in the majors. That's that. If that's your baseline for a Hall of Famer, I guess I'm not really familiar with it, so I want to sort of set up the conversation as much as I can. What really hurt me was that 9-year stretch from 2009 to 2016, where I really was about 3,000 miles separated from this entire university.
Well, my advice would be then, Murph, next weekend when the UCF is hosting Memphis, you and our good friend Trace, you sit next to each other. Instead of watching the actual current product, you guys should come up with the baseball list of who should be future Hall of Famers. How about that? Everyone, Trace.
We'll definitely do that. We will talk about better days like UCF baseball in 2004.
Man. All right, let's wrap. Elo, you said this. By the way, I'm making a prediction here. This is going to be the summer of Elo on blackandgoldbanneret.com because we have I have in the hopper a bunch of story ideas that it's right in your wheelhouse, man. I want to. We're talking about all-time teams that I got talking about, your all-time UCF softball starting 9. Hopefully
it doesn't involve me breaking news of softball coaches leaving, but last year.
Listen, Woj, keep it positive around here. We need some consistency. What else? Like all-time UCF basketball starting five, I think would be a fun one to take a look at.
We got the Bannies coming out too soon.
The Bannies are going to be coming out soon, and I think we're competition around May. So that's going to be fun. So we got a lot of stuff that's going to be coming up for you here on the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast as we wrap things up. Don't forget to follow us at blackandgoldbanneret.com, UCF_Banneret on Twitter, and Facebook.com/Black and Gold Banneret. And thanks also to Jeremy Brener. Follow him at Jeremy Brener on Twitter.
We're tweeting a lot of Rocket stuff this week. I'll be tweeting a lot of Magic stuff from the Magic game.
We need to put a Rockets filter on Jeremy's Twitter feed because obviously he does a lot of work with the SB Nation Houston Rockets site, and he's really proud of that. He does an outstanding job with that, by the way. But hey, listen, this is Orlando, man. We gotta focus on the Magic here, and at least during the Eastern Conference.
I'll be there Friday and Sunday night, baby.
There we go.
Enjoy your 5-game series.
Oh.
Roger. Hey, that's 2 paychecks I'm getting. All right,
That's right.
Just extend it to 6 so I can get 3. That's all, man.
That, man. All right, for Eric and Brian, I'm Jeff. Thanks for listening. This has been the Black Gold Banneret Podcast. We'll catch you next week.